the best coaches in the game. We really ain't playing. We regroup up in the Slack chat where the coaches debrief. We be piecing these puzzles, occupy the chunk of the pie. Ain't no lie when we hit the block, helmet's casket is top. You be seeing helmet after helmet, helmet after helmet. First place, second place, fifth place, eighth place, 12th place, 15, 16, 20. So many helmets, you got blurred vision, we got too many. Tick your tech. Oh man, shit. They got us fucked up. Army, regroup. We pledge always to have that edge. We don't fire warning shots. Competition just dropped. We locked and loaded before lock. Whatever the time, yeah. Do you even correlate?
Being the best requires a willingness to outwork your competition. There's always someone smarter, faster, sharper, more naturally gifted to come around.
Welcome back, DFS Army. It is Fantasy Fling as we take back a look at Week 3. The Milli Maker, it was a return to what we saw in 2021. We're going to take a look at that real quick, and we are going to do MME review of the top DFS pros, specifically the Milli Maker, and take a look at their strategy. So let's take a look. All right. So each and every week, as I've mentioned before, I do this write-up on DFSArmy.com, the Milli Maker review, and I basically tweet this out as soon as I do it. So if you're not following me on Twitter, give me a follow at FantasyFling. What we're looking at is trends that we see in the Milli Maker, not just from any one slate, but going back years. So let's take a look at the winning lineup. First off, we'll go over to Fantasy Labs. And, I had someone in the comments last week ask, where we look for these stats. This is over at FantasyLabs.com. So you can sign up for Fantasy Labs. It's free. These top contests, as you will see, as soon as you sign up, you have access to these contests, and you can look back at every single week, and you can look at, the top pros and what they're doing in various contests, based on different entry size, different cost to enter those contests. You can look at a lot of different factors, low stakes, high stakes, all that stuff. So last week, let me just click this here because it's not going to go away until we click it again. So last week in the Milli Maker was more so what we saw in 2021. So the start of this year, 2 really high scores to start the year. First, Rapid Fire XD, DFS Army longtime subscriber. He scored 251 points. And then last week we had our week 2, there was a 284 point score that took down the Milli. This week it went way low, lower than we've seen in a long time. Now there's actually, this score isn't correct. Something's going on with the Jaguars D. They're showing zeros, but they actually scored 9 points, as you'll see here in a second. But essentially what we have is Lamar Jackson, a skinny stack with Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. We had Leonard Fournette, Damian Pierce, Jalen Waddle, Allen Lazard, Devonta Smith, Mark Andrews, and Mac Hollins. And then the Jaguars D rounded it out. It did 83 total ownership, and it did score actually 210, as you will see here. So as far as stacking, it was crazy because the week before we had that Tua Baltimore game that just went off. You between Tua and Lamar Jackson, Tua threw 6 touchdowns, and the stack was like 160 points, like 40 points a piece out of 4 plays. So it was crazy. So you kind of would have thought, a lot of people were going to overreact to that in crazy stack games. And you will see that once we get at the MME strategy, that's what a lot of people did. However, what we saw doing the back test and, just doing this write-up as I did, looking all of 2020 and 2021 is more so you would see a lot of small stacks. That's what we saw in 2021. So 2020, that year started with a lot of thick stacks, heavy game stacks. In 2021, we saw smaller stacks, much like we saw in week 3 of the NFL season, as we're about to look at. So Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. So this stack was actually the only stack. So it's been quite a while since there's only been one stack with two players. Normally you might have, maybe you have 3 stacks, right? But you'll have like 2 players from each stack. So you have 6 players, or you have like one big stack of like 4 or 5 players. You only had 2 stack players in this stack. So that was quite different. And the total stack points were 72 points, and you had an average 36 between these two. But as we will get into in the ownership, not only was the stack extremely efficient from a scoring standpoint, but also from an ownership standpoint. So this stack, this total ownership was 83%. Now, after week 1, we had 115%. And then week 2, we saw 96%, which is basically right on average of what we saw in all of 2021. And this week it dropped even further. And the main reason for that is the top leverage play on the slate of Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. So incredibly under-owned. This is like literally the definition of leverage when you have a stack, 2 players that's 5% owned essentially, and 2 of the top scoring players on the slate. You know, they combined each, I believe, had 28 points, so total of 72 points, and just extremely low owned. In comparison, the week before, the stack, we had an average, it was like 33% over 4 players. So that's like an average. This one rather is an average of like 2.5% per player. So way lower than even last week. So it was in week 2. So it was an outlier among outliers. As far as other leverage plays, Matt Collins at 8%, he absolutely smashed. It was $3,300, 8% ownership. And as you can see, he had 32 points. So he had almost 10x the salary. Is absolutely incredible. Again, I shout out DFS Army's domination station, because Matt Hollins was a guy who just kept getting crammed in my lineup, and I was all about it to have some exposure to him at his price. But I had limited my exposure a little bit because I was like, well, what if this guy doesn't get any targets and then just crashes my lineups? And the DFS Army domination station, it knows better. It's smarter than me. So it was cramming it in the lineups. He was the top fantasy points per dollar play. And then one thing you will notice is players that are minimally priced, they're near the minimum. They don't necessarily need to be stacked, right? Because they don't have to do a lot to get there. So sometimes they're just optimal plays. They don't necessarily need to be stacked. You don't have to force a stack. And in this case, it totally paid off. It's the only stack in the game was Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. Devonta Smith was another smash. I had exposure to him the week prior in the 2-game slate. Well, this was the week to have exposure to him. He absolutely smashed. He had an ownership of 5% and scored over 30 points. So it really doesn't get better than that from Devonta Smith. As far as pricing, overall pricing and value, again, one thing we continue to notice with Milli Maker winners, it doesn't matter whether, it's 210 points or 250 points. It's very rare that we see players in the 8 to 10K range. So at the running back and wide receiver positions specifically, Lamar Jackson, he was the highest priced player in this lineup. And then his pass catcher, not in the 8 to 10K range, right? So Mark Andrews, he was 6,900. And really, Mark Andrews, as far as total pass catchers, he's currently 7th in points. Clearly the number 1 tight end. In fact, Mark Andrews has kind of been a staple for Milli Maker at the tight end in the past 4 or 5 games. Dating back to last season, he was in the Milli Maker to end the season a couple times. In the past 3 weeks, he's been in the Milli Maker twice. So, again, they are the 2 only players in the top 5 for pricing at their position. Running back and wide receiver, you typically will see most of the core players in the 5 to 7K range, and then you'll see a couple values sprinkled in there. So, yeah, you have Leonard Fournette, 6,500, Dameon Pierce, 5,000, Jalen Waddle, 6,800, Allen Lazar, 6,000, Devonta Smith, 5,200, and Matt Collins being that one value play at 3,300. Jaguars, the second time they've made it into the Milli Maker. They are much improved team overall, as we will look at a little bit more on the MME strategy. So Another thing is the ceiling. We have noticed the ceiling continues to fluctuate. Last year, what we saw was an average of 233 points to win the Milli Maker. In 2020, it was 243 points. So it had actually dropped between 2020 and 2021. To start the year, it was high, right? So it was over 260 points. This week was lower scoring. It was 210 points. And the reason that we want to keep an eye on that is in relation to actual lineup construction and specifically stacking. When there's going to be lower scoring games on the slate, like if you see the Vegas totals come out and you see a bunch of 40-point games and really not any 50-point games, it's probably going to be a negative EDV decision to throw a bunch of lineups full of game stacks, right? At that point, you might be looking to do more team stacks, like a Lamar and Mark Andrews or Lamar and Bateman, and maybe you only bring it back with one person if you do a full game stack. But the heavy game stacking, when the scoring is down, it's not going to work. So the Vegas lines are something to keep an eye on, and that's why we continue to look back at the Milli Maker score. Now, let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so we're going to take a look at MME strategy of some of the top DFS pros. All right, so, and I don't know why Fantasy Labs is, it might be StreamYard, but Fantasy Labs does not seem to like to work for me very often whenever I'm doing the stream. When I'm like compiling this stuff on my own, it's fine. But whenever I'm doing the stream, it seems to give me issues. So just bear with me a second here. I'm going to look at the main. We are going to look at the Milli Maker. We'll try to reload it. And if it doesn't reload it, luckily I hand wrote a bunch of notes. So you will just have to look at my face and I will talk about all the things that we found last week. So I mean, it's really just the Milli Maker, right? You saw that the Wildcat popped right up. So if that's the case, we might just have to freestyle this and we will look at the Wildcat. Okay, here we go. So let's take a look at Osmo, top DFS player in the world, more or less. I don't think he's a top NFL player in the world currently, but we'll see how that shakes out over the entire NFL season. So, you know, I kind of tweeted this out, and one thing I wanted to take a look at was he had some crazy game stacks. So, and this is like something you could probably do more so if you're an MME player, right? You can say, there's maybe a handful of games that I want to target, and if that game goes off, I'm going to have some pretty heavy stacks in that game. So he had a Derek Carr, Josh Jacobs, Matt Collins, and Devontae Adams lineup. Obviously, it was nowhere close to getting there in the Milli Maker, but regardless, the strategy is there. So he had Matt Collins actually absolutely crushed. He had like about 33 points, but Devontae Adams, he just didn't have the ceiling you would expect from a Devontae Adams. I think he's kind of finding out that Derek Carr is not Aaron Rodgers. Carr smashed because Hollins got there. Jacobs was it was a sharp play. Obviously, he was 3% owned, so it was a very low owned stack. Overall, this lineup was 74%. But you can see he was essentially targeting this game, and then he had Diggs as a one-off. Cordarrelle Patterson is a one-off as well. And then I guess actually Diggs was he wasn't a one-off. Thinking of this week, we got the Ravens versus the Bills, but he also had a big stack, and then Patterson, Diggs, and Devontae Parker was the other one-off, which was a really sharp play. Obviously, once Jacoby Myers was ruled out of that game, so. And then you will see in his second most highest performing lineup, he had a Patriots stack. So Mac Jones, Ramondre Stevenson, and Kendrick Bourne in that stack. So again, top pros, they may target a couple of game environments and do some heavy stacking in those games. But it's not something that most people are going to do if you're just studying the slate, because as we've seen, looking at the Milli Maker winners, a lot of times the heavy stacks aren't quite working. As far as Osmo's user exposures, he was heavy on Cup and Higbee, Skowronek, and Stafford. So that was a game, obviously, a game environment that he was targeting. And really, he didn't have a lot of bringbacks, essentially because he was just hoping that the Rams were going to smash. And they did pretty well, but, enough points weren't there. It wasn't that kind of smash to where, you would really get there to win a GPP with those amount of players. So he had 61% Cup. The field was 9%. Higbee, he was very much over the field on Higbee as well as Skowronek, who's been seeing kind of a lot of bump up in targets. He's pretty much there with Allen Robinson as far as total targets. Another game he targeted pretty heavily was the Tampa Bay game. And really, I think just with being condensed offense, you could see without Mike Evans, without Godwin, without Julio. So it was easy to hope that game would maybe shoot out between Brady and Rodgers and go with Russell Gage. He was heavy on Russell Gage, who was just a smash play. Fournette, even though Fournette was pretty chalky as far as GPP standards at 16%, he was very heavy on him, and he disappointed. And that's how he had negative ROI on the day. You're heavy on a lot of these players and they don't really outperform their salary and don't smash. That's what's going to happen. So he had a lot of Fournettes. And then also Monty, Monty kept me from having a profitable day. It was pretty much a day where I broke even. I lost a little bit, but had Monty had a good day, I certainly would have had a good day, because we saw Herbert have a good day, and it was a great matchup. And really, this is a top pro in the world who's willing to eat that chalk. So we've seen this over and over looking at top DFS pros. They will eat chalk with players in the right matchups, and you're looking to get different elsewhere. So that's kind of how Osmo's day went. Now, if you go to Roto Grinders top rankings, McLovin is actually the number one DFS player in the world for football as of right now. So he did some stacks, but he did not have as heavy and thick stacks as Osmo did. But you will see his top performing lineup. He had Mahomes, Juju, and Kelsey, 150 points. So, a really low scoring day. And even from the pros, that's just kind of how it goes. But actually, not McLovin. We're going to look at Chipotle Addict next. And he didn't do very well in the Milli Maker, but did quite well in some other contests. But yeah, that was his top performing lineup. He also had a Carr, Adams, and Holland stack. So Osmo wasn't the only one who was on the Raiders game as far as team stack perspective. So we got Carr, Devontae, and Matt Collins. Very low ownership as well, 75%, but only 143 points. So quite low scoring from some of our top pros. He was pretty heavy on Kendrick Bourne as well. This is just when value hits the slate. Jacoby Myers, I know DFS Army Domination Station, he was popping as soon as Jacoby Myers was out. It's like looking for value. And some of these guys ended up doing quite well. Devontae Parker was the guy to add. And by the way, Geek was all over that in the Discord. If you're a DFS Army subscriber, you have access to the Discord, and you would have been on the right play for Devontae Parker. But nonetheless, Bourne was his top play. And then he was also pretty heavy on the Tampa Bay game as well. So it doesn't always work out. You could be on the right game. Just when you get a guy like Brady and a guy like Rodgers, and you're like, if these two are trading blows all day, and you get guys who are low owned, like Russell Gage, who's only $4,700, and he smashes as he did, and you get a massive shootout, maybe 30 points or whatever, 30, 40 points. Then these guys are really smash it, and this is how you're going to win a large field GPP. This is why this is their strategy. So Perryman 20% owned, the field was 4%. Didn't smash, but the process was right. The results aren't always there. It's trust the process, because you're going to play a low owned player like Perryman, and you got two MVPs, former MVPs, going in a game, and you hope that game shoots out. So you're just trying to get low owned guys and find the right environment. So Kyle Pitts, that was a pretty sharp play last week. He had a pretty good game. Again, you could see he was also on Devontae Adams, Matt Collins. I believe he as we will go down here, he was 20% exposure to him, and the field 8%. Same with Josh Jacobs, 16%, the field 3%. So you see a lot of pros targeting the same games. Now, before we finish up here, take a look at a couple other guys. Now, this one kind of surprised me. Giant Squid is a guy who I've seen a lot of head-to-heads for this player. And one of the top ranked players in the world for sure. Top 5, top 10. So kind of the same thing. Now, this lineup was crazy to me because you got guys who are really low priced, and you actually had the right game environment, right? So he had a team stack, hoping it was going to be a blowout because there was no running backs, which it was. The Jaguars won 38-10. You got Trevor Lawrence, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, and Marvin Jones. And still, I mean, really for their salary, 2 out of the 4 smashed. Christian Kirk almost got there, but still, I just don't know with this lineup that the ceiling is there. And this is kind of like what you look at, right? You might have guys who can really outproduce their salary, and you're banking on the game environment to really go off. But even that said, like with guys like Marvin Jones, Zay Jones, Christian Kirk certainly could smash, and these guys really did. There's just, for all 4 of them, they're not all like 4 going to get there for it to really win. Even with David Montgomery, if he smashed, it took 210 points to win this. So just wasn't quite enough. But the thought process, and this is the MME guys, they will do this because they know if that one game really goes off, they have situated themselves quite nicely to leverage the field. This was only 97% owned. So last person I want to look at, Chipotle Addict. And we'll look at some of his exposures, and then we're going to take a look at his Wildcat strategy. Is he MME'd the Wildcat? So Chipotle Addict. Now, when I was looking at, it's funny because some of these pros are just insanely good at what they do. But when you look at the Milli Maker, and through 3 weeks of the Milli Maker, Chipotle Addict has a negative ROI. So if you just watch, you'd be at the Milli Maker and you'd be like, wow, this guy, he's losing a lot of money actually. But then when you go to some other contests, you're like, okay, I see why this player is one of the top ranked players in the world, as we're about to find out real quick here. So his top lineup in the Milli Maker, kind of more what you see. This is someone who really looks at past slates for sure and kind of tailors their lineup around that. What you see here is more so what we saw in Milli Maker winners in 2021. So you literally see 3 separate stacks and 3 one-offs. So 3 stacks of 2 players and 3 one-offs. You have Herbert and Williams, Pierce and Houston D, and then you have Cooper Kupp. You have Kupp and Ertz. So this is very similar to what we saw in a lot of Milli Maker wins in 2021. As far as his exposures, he was pretty heavy in that Detroit-Minnesota game. So we see Kirk Cousins here, 47%, Hawkinson at 44%, Irv Smith at 54%, Amron at 46%, Delvin Cook over the field there at 31%, so on and so forth. Yeah, he had Thielen too. So pretty heavy over the field in that game. I was too. Didn't work out for me. Also didn't work out for Chipotle Addict in this competition. However, let's just take his name off here. Let's look at the Wildcat. No, this is a mass multi-entry. Okay. Even though there's only 5,000 entries, you can MME this, as you will see. Chipotle Addict did. And he was the number 1 player in this. He won this competition, actually. So it's one of and talk about being mega rich. To spend $333 on 150 lineups, this is basically $50,000 that he spent just to play in this competition. But his ROI totally paid off, totally worth it. So $224,000 that he profited on this competition because he got the top spot. He had Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews stack, brought it back with Kendrick Bourne. So really good stack. Had he brought it back with Devontae Parker, would have been even better. But yeah, he had Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews brought back with Kendrick Bourne. And then looks like there was a Fournette and Romeo Dobbs stack as well. Stephon Diggs was a one-off. Joe Mixon was a one-off. And Matt Collins was a one-off. But all in great game scripts, right? Joe Mixon definitely disappointed everyone, but it was an awesome game script, what it looked like on paper. Same with Diggs going against Miami, same thing. And then Matt Collins as well. Again, we talk about a one-off that's very low price, $3,300. Absolutely smashed. And also, this is a reason why. Now, I'm not going to tell people to go play in $333 tournaments if you can't afford to. But this is also the reason why you should play in contests that there's only 5,000 entries. GPP is 5,000, 10,000. Much easier to win these type of contests than the Milli Maker, that had 200,000 plus, by the way. So one other thing I want to take a look at here. Now, I looked at the slant. No, this wasn't it. Fair catch. There it is. I found it. So, it's kind of funny because because on Fantasy Labs, by the way, you cannot, see the avatars here. So like I had no idea, and I went through this lineup and I was like, this is a sharp player. And I literally took a note of this. I was like, this is a sharp player. And then I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw that this was a DFS Army subscriber. Surprise, surprise. The DraftKings 1989 DFS Army subscriber. Another big win for DFS Army. $50,000 in this contest of the $5 entry to the 250K flea flickers. So smashed again, DFS Army. So many big wins to start the season. We got a Lamar Jackson stack with Mark Andrews, and then Derrick Henry, Cordarrelle Patterson in a stack with Tyler Lockett, Marquise Brown, and then we have Romeo Doubs and Shi Smith as well as a Houston D. So 208 points, absolutely smashed. Would have been good enough for second in the Milli Maker, by the way. Imagine that if we had two top 3 finishes in the Milli Maker to start the season. The first 3 weeks have been absolutely crazy. So congratulations to the DraftKings 1989. DFS Army continues to smash. By the way, guys, DFS Army is offering a free month membership. If you want to get access to the coaches, the content, the tools, our domination station, the cheat sheets, the NFL matchups, the power rankings, all the things, you can be a DFS Army subscriber to. In fact, right now, Underdog Fantasy, you can get, they are doing a 100% deposit match up to $100, and you get a DFS Army subscription. So if you go to Underdog, use code DFS Army. If not, holler at me on Twitter at FantasyFling. I would love to give you the link to check all the different free VIP subscriptions that we have, so you can get a free month of DFS Army right now. And you can join the team of multiple Milli Maker winners, and every week, big winners. So be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. If you are already subscribed, hit the notification button so that you never miss a episode of when we go live. So, and give me a follow on Twitter if you have any Milli Maker questions at FantasyFling on Twitter. Also, any MME questions, give me a holler. Hope everyone has an awesome week in GPPs, and we'll see you next week.